The point being, this rule, it's been rooted in our history, but also a history that's way bigger and far deeper than we have ever experienced in our tradition, the Northumbrian church, the Irish church, and that's reflected, I think, in some of the things that have helped us and helped create this rule. Now, we want to move on now, and I just want to do some of the practicalities, Andy, of what we actually said. There's two parts of the Northumbria Community Rule, availability and vulnerability. And again, they come out of our experience. In order to live this life, we found we had to be available. And in our case, what that availability meant was we had to lay down certain things that perhaps we might like to do personally in order to make ourselves more available to God. And availability also meant for me that I had a family to feed, so I needed to work, I needed to do things. You had yourself to support and your ministry to support because you were travelling everywhere. And so availability to us meant that we had to have an intentional way of living. And we chose an intentional way of living. And in that availability, we learned first that we needed to be available to God in the cell of our own heart. And what we mean by that is, within the monastic tradition, there's a picture of the cell being the place where you really face up to who you are, who God is. It's not a place for running away, I can guarantee that. And it's the place where basically, Andy's got a part of the picture rule here.
I've got two pictures which I was looking for.
Yeah,
the first one here.
Can you get this or not?
It says, seek God for yourself, don't get others to do it for you. And there's a picture here of a cell, and the person in there is thinking, go to your cell and your cell will teach you everything.
That's a great desert father.
And this one, the heading is, in the desert, and here you've got a nice distant desert landscape, and there's a little voice bubble, and it says, dear God, wish you were here.
Yeah, one of the big things about the cell, I used to have a saying called Alone Together, and what was at the heart of that was that you were called first by God, by yourself. So it's the old thing of Jesus looking to the disciples and calling them, and they had to make their own response. And that was something they did alone. And then when they made that response, they found themselves in community with other people who had made that response. And therefore they weren't responsible for entertaining that other group of people. They weren't responsible for making that other group of people happy or making them feel good about themselves. They were responsible for responding with those companions on that journey to Jesus.
It was God who had called those other people to be there, so therefore it was God who was responsible for them, not the other folk who...
Yes. Yeah. And so in our earliest community days, we never saw ourselves as counsellors. We were too broken to be counsellors. Anyway, we saw ourselves as companions. I never saw myself as a counsellor.
I think we did an enormous amount of counselling.
We did.
People.
But I never saw
we always counselled people with what was the best that we knew at the time, and just hope. But certainly, you're back to your wounded healers thing.
Yeah, it is a wounded healer thing. I saw myself as a companion with other people, and if there was people who were struggling with stuff and I had something to pass on with them, I'd pass it on. But I very quickly wanted them to see themselves as people and not as casualties or victims or less people than we were. And I think that was hence the cell, hence the whole thing of you have a responsibility here yourself to seek God for yourself, to really face yourself. And that was a continual emphasis. And I think the alone together thing was a great help in bringing us together as community as we began to grow, because there wasn't that sense of the leaders have got to do something.
That alone together, we used to have a picture, I've got it just over there, I think, of the individual cells where you'd have two uprights and a slopey roof, you know. And we would have one on its own, and then you would have a clump of them. And a clump of those cells didn't mean that everybody was living in the same cell, but that there were people who were aware of each other being there, all on the same journey of seeking God. But there's still
and all over the place.
And further far.
Yeah, I think it's important to get that in right at the beginning. We're a community that's dispersed. We had a mother house that I was there for a long time. Andy's on Holy Island. We had people that lived at the mother house simply because they were helping to to administer everything that was growing and developing, but the community was dispersed. And there's certain things that held us together. And
the temptation was always to get engrossed in the difficulty about working what the mother house was about, and there was always the temptation to become preoccupied with that and see that as being what the community was, whereas the community was always the dispersed people, not that.
But I think that's grown, hasn't it?
Oh, very much so.
I think as we balanced out the Nether Springs, Upper Springs visions as well, that's grown. Another aspect of our lives, which I found out later was a major aspect of monastic communities, was hospitality. And hospitality was almost forced upon us in many ways, simply because people would pop in, wouldn't they? I mean, I don't know where people came from half the time. I think you brought a lot of people home. I remember coming back to Ravensdown one day. I'd been down to see my mum with Linda, and I came back in, and the house was full. And I remember the guy sitting on the settee, he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I live here." And those were your visitors.
I can't remember who that would have been.
Can you not remember?
Could have been anybody.
I couldn't remember who that was. Yeah. But hospitality became a big deal thing, didn't it? And the
house was big enough.
Yes.
Actually,
yeah.
And I think this made a big difference. It might not have been sort of expensively furnished or anything like that, but it was a big enough property that if you needed to get away from the people, there were physically places to go, and I think that does make a big difference.
It makes an enormous difference. We've just done a thing with 4 kids going through community, and our place is big enough in Turkey, and they said one of the most important things was having somewhere to go yourself,
yes,
where you've got space to be. But coming back to this theme of hospitality can be extremely dangerous for families, and I think throughout our experience, from living first at Ravensdown, where we had a big enough place, then to the Grange, where we had you living in the cupboard and people coming, and then to Hetton Hall, where we're actually living in the house before our place is worked out, and our kids are living with everybody. We have to put boundaries in, and it's important that for any community to know their limits and to know their boundaries, and for any family to know their boundaries.
I'm going to show you another picture again.
When exercising community.
This one's we've nicked a picture from a cartoon Life of St John of God, in mind.
That's it is holy ground.
It says, "Family life is holy ground," and it's got a cartoon here of a family, but then on the wall is pinned a little thing which says "Tread gently." Yeah. And I think I haven't realised just how much, whenever I think of the words out of any part of the office, I'm automatically seeing the pictures. The pictures have been what have fixed things in our heads, I think.
But I think as well, one of the reasons you did that was because when we started off, a lot of the people that we were living with couldn't read.
Or were not comfortable reading.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of words together would have been too much.